My name is Evelyn. I am 31 years old, and for the past 6 years, I have worked as a senior compliance auditor for a commercial property trust. 48 hours ago, on a bright Thursday afternoon, my mother stood in the paved driveway of a newly renovated three-bedroom brick home on Elmwood Avenue. She was holding a chilled bottle of Prosecco in one hand and a giant gold housewarming ribbon in the other. Standing beside her was my 26-year-old brother, Julian, wearing a tailored linen shirt, grinning broadly, and filming a celebration vlog for his social media followers. My mother's voice carried across the entire front lawn as neighbors looked out through their curtains. She clapped her hands together, turned toward me as I stepped out of my car, and said loudly enough for the whole street to hear, "Evelyn, do not make that sour face. Julian has a real future to build. You are a single woman working behind a desk in the city. You will always make more money, but your brother needs stability right now. We used what was necessary to secure this property. You owe your family that much." I did not scream. I did not step onto the manicured grass. I stayed standing on the public sidewalk by the curb, holding a plain cream manila file folder in my left hand. She thought she had backed me into a corner. She thought she had pulled off the ultimate parental maneuver, taking what she believed was rightfully hers to give to her favorite child. What my mother did not know, and what the official county deed of conveyance inside my folder was about to prove 30 seconds later, was that the wire transfer she executed 2 days ago did not buy Julian a home. It bought me the entire deed, the underlying mortgage note, and the immediate right of unconditional eviction. To understand how my mother managed to drain $160,000 from an account she did not earn, you have to understand the dynamic of our household going back a decade. In my family, there were two distinct categories of human beings, the producer and the prince. I was the producer. Julian was the prince. Julian was 5 years younger than me. From the day he was born, my mother treated him as if the world owed him a perpetual standing ovation. If Julian got caught skipping high school classes, my mother blamed the teachers for being uninspiring. If Julian wrecked his first car at 19 because he was texting behind the wheel, my father claimed the city roads were poorly maintained. And when Julian dropped out of university after 3 semesters to pursue vague ventures in lifestyle coaching and cryptocurrency trading, my mother declared that traditional education was too small for his grand vision. Meanwhile, I started working at 16. I bussed tables at a local seafood diner on Friday nights and Saturday mornings. When I went to college, I took a full course load while working 30 hours a week in the university accounting department. I did not go on spring break trips. I did not buy new clothes every season. When I graduated with honors in finance, my parents did not attend the ceremony because Julian had a regional recreational soccer match on the same afternoon. My mother told me on the phone that evening, "You know your brother gets anxious when we aren't in the bleachers. You are strong, Evelyn. You do not need us to hold your hand." I accepted that reality early. I realized that if I wanted safety, dignity, and independence, I would have to construct it brick by brick without expecting a single crumb of support from the people who raised me. At 23, I landed an entry-level analyst position at an institutional asset management firm. I moved into a tiny, drafty basement studio apartment 45 minutes outside the city center. The plumbing rattled every time the upstairs neighbors ran their shower, and the winter drafts were so severe that I slept wearing a fleece jacket. But my rent was low, and every single dollar that did not go toward basic groceries, transit passes, and electricity was deposited directly into a high-yield capital savings account. That account was my lifeline. It represented 9 years of discipline, 60-hour workweeks, uncompensated overtime, and thousands of skipped meals and missed social events. By January of this year, the balance in that primary savings vehicle reached exactly $162,410. That money was my future. I had spent 6 months preparing to make a down payment on a mixed-use commercial and residential duplex in the historic district, a property that would provide me with stable rental yields and a secure home of my own. The vulnerability, however, lay in how the account had originally been established. When I was 21 and still a junior in college, I opened that specific savings account at a local credit union where my family had banked for 30 years. Because I had no established credit history at the time, My mother was listed as a dormant secondary signatory on the original signature card. Over the next 10 years, as I transitioned my daily banking, payroll, direct deposits, and credit cards to an institutional private bank, I kept that specific credit union account as a dedicated, untouchable vault. I changed the mailing address, switched to paperless statements, and never wrote checks against it. I made the fatal mistake of assuming that dormant meant forgotten. 3 weeks ago, Julian announced at Sunday family dinner that he had proposed to his girlfriend of 4 months, a woman named Vanessa, whose primary occupation appeared to be filming daily makeup routines for the internet. Vanessa made it clear that she would not agree to set a wedding date until Julian provided a freestanding, 4-bedroom house with a landscaped yard in an upscale suburban enclave. My mother was ecstatic. She spent 2 weeks touring properties with Julian and Vanessa, looking at suburban developments far beyond anything my brother's sporadic freelance income could ever justify. Finally, they found the house on Elmwood Avenue. It was a beautiful property. Hardwood floors, exposed brick accents, custom kitchen cabinetry, and an open deck. The seller was a distressed estate executor looking for a rapid closing, and the agreed purchase price was $410,000. The required cash down payment, closing costs, and escrow reserve totaled exactly $160,000. Julian did not have $1,600 in his checking account, let alone $160,000. On Monday morning, my mother called me while I was in the middle of a quarterly compliance meeting. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We found the perfect home for Julian and Vanessa. The contract is drawn up, but the closing agent requires proof of liquid funds by Wednesday morning. Your father and I have discussed it, and we want you to transfer your reserve savings to Julian as an early family wedding gift. It is time for you to step up as an older sister." I stepped out of the conference room and into the hallway. "Mom, that money is my entire life savings. I am actively preparing to put an earnest money deposit on a commercial duplex next month. I am not gifting $160,000 to Julian for a suburban house he cannot afford to maintain." My mother's voice hardened instantly. The sweetness vanished, replaced by the sharp, razor-thin edge she reserved for whenever I refused her demands. "You are so selfish," she spat into the receiver. "You sit in your shiny office, hoard money like a miser while your brother is trying to start a family. You think because you have a fancy job that you are better than everyone else. This is family money, Evelyn. You wouldn't even have that career if your father and I hadn't put a roof over your head as a child. You will give him that money, or you will regret it." "The answer is no, Mom," I said firmly and hung up the phone. I thought that was the end of the conversation. I assumed that, like every other time I had set a boundary, she would complain to our relatives, call me ungrateful for 3 weeks, and eventually move on to find another source of credit for Julian. I completely underestimated how far her entitlement reached. On Tuesday afternoon, while I was reviewing an institutional portfolio audit, my phone buzzed with an automated alert from the credit union mobile application. Notification: authorized in-person wire transfer completed. Amount: $160,000. Destination: First Heritage Title and Escrow Services. Remaining balance: $2,410. My heart dropped into my stomach. My hands went completely cold. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I immediately called the credit union's fraud department, demanding an explanation. The branch manager came on the line 5 minutes later. "Ms. Vance, the transfer was executed in person at our downtown branch at 2:15 this afternoon by Mrs. Margaret Vance." She produced 2 forms of government identification, verified the original account opening documents from 2015 where she remains registered as an authorized joint signer, and signed the wire disbursement authorization for the real estate escrow account. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. That money was deposited exclusively through my payroll for 9 years. Not a single dollar originated from her. The manager's tone was apologetic, but legally rigid. Under the terms of the master signature card on file, any authorized signer possesses full transactional authority to draw down or wire funds. From a regulatory perspective, the transfer was fully compliant. If you dispute the validity of the underlying intent, That is a civil matter between the account holders. My mother had walked into the branch, exploited an unclosed administrative loophole from a decade ago, emptied my life savings, and wired the entire sum directly into the closing agent's escrow account to buy Julian his house. For about 4 minutes, the room felt like it was spinning. I felt the sharp, suffocating panic that comes when the people who are supposed to protect you rob you in broad daylight. Then the panic stopped. My professional training took over. In the corporate compliance sector, when a party commits an unauthorized or bad faith maneuver, you do not retaliate with screaming, tears, or emotional tantrums. You examine the paperwork. You find the structural flaws. And you use the exact legal apparatus they relied on to crush them completely. I called my private attorney, Arthur Miller, who specialized in commercial real estate finance and escrow transactions. "Arthur," I said, my voice completely steady. "My mother just wired $160,000 of my personal funds to First Heritage Title and Escrow for a residential purchase on Elmwood Avenue. The closing is scheduled for Thursday morning. I need you to pull the escrow file immediately." Arthur spent 2 hours pulling the public filings and title documents. At 5:30 that evening, he called me back. "Evelyn, here is the situation," Arthur explained. "The contract for the Elmwood Avenue property was drafted by a sloppy suburban real estate agent. Julian Vance is listed as the prospective occupant and primary borrower on the secondary mortgage application, but the purchase contract itself includes an assignment clause. More importantly, the escrow agreement specifies that the party providing the cash down payment retains legal ownership rights over the purchase interest until final title conveyance at closing." "Explain what that means in plain English, Arthur," I said. "It means your mother did not wire the money from a joint account bearing Julian's name. She wired it directly from an account where your social security number is the primary tax identification number. Furthermore, the escrow officer flagged the transfer as third-party funds. Under federal anti-money laundering guidelines, third-party depositors must execute a formal gift letter declaring the funds are non-repayable, or the title deed must reflect the depositor's legal interest." "Did my mother sign a gift letter on my behalf?" I asked. "She couldn't," Arthur replied with a low chuckle. "She tried to sign her own name, but the compliance officer at First Heritage rejected it because your social security number owns the underlying funds. The title company notified the seller that unless the primary tax holder on the down payment funds signed the settlement statement, the closing could not proceed." I leaned forward in my chair. "What happens if I sign the settlement statement myself?" "If you sign the settlement statement and step in as the primary cash purchaser, you legally assume the purchase contract. Because the seller wants a clean, expedited closing, and because your down payment represents nearly 40% of the total valuation, the private lender will issue the remaining balance note directly to you based on your pristine credit score and high corporate salary. The entire deed will be registered exclusively in your name. Julian gets nothing. Your mother gets nothing. The house becomes 100% your legal real estate asset." I did not hesitate for a single second. "Draft the conveyance documents, Arthur. I am coming to your office right now." On Wednesday morning, while my mother and Julian were busy ordering new living room furniture and planning their celebration party, I sat in the executive conference room of First Heritage Title and Escrow. I signed every closing document. I signed the master deed. I signed the mortgage assumption note. Because my income and credit profile were flawless, the institutional lender approved the conveyance in less than 4 hours. By Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, the county registrar of deeds officially stamped and recorded the title. Property, 742, Elmwood Avenue. Grantee and sole legal owner, Evelyn Vance. Encumbrance, 0 secondary claims. Authorized occupants, none. My mother, completely ignorant of how property law actually worked, assumed that because she had sent the wire, the keys handed over at the preliminary walkthrough belonged to Julian. She did not bother to read the final settlement packet delivered to the title portal. She simply saw the transaction status marked as funded and assumed her scheme was complete. That brings us back to Thursday afternoon in the driveway of 742 Elmwood Avenue. The sun was shining over the front porch. A large white banner hung across the garage door reading, "Welcome home, Julian and Vanessa." Julian was standing near the front steps, holding his smartphone on a gimbal, narrating to his live stream audience. Yeah, guys, hard work really pays off. When you stay focused on your vision, the universe just aligns for you. Welcome to our new crib. My mother was pouring sparkling wine into plastic flutes for Vanessa and two of Julian's friends who had come to help unpack boxes from a rented moving truck parked at the curb. Then, my car pulled up to the driveway. When my mother saw me get out, wearing my dark work slacks and a charcoal trench coat, holding my manila folder, her face twisted into a smug, triumphant grin. She walked toward the sidewalk, holding her glass, her eyes full of condescension. Well, she said, looking down her nose at me. Look who decided to show up. Have you come to apologize for being so bitter on Monday? I hope you're ready to celebrate your brother's milestone, Evelyn. You see what happens when a family works together? Julian has a real asset now. You need to let go of your petty jealousy. Julian looked over from his camera, laughing. Hey, Evelyn, thanks for coming around. Make sure you take your shoes off if you come inside. Vanessa just had the entryway carpets cleaned. I stood on the sidewalk. I looked at my brother, who had never paid a property tax bill in his life. I looked at my mother, who had stolen 9 years of my labor with a pen stroke and felt completely justified in doing so. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult them. I opened the manila folder. Mom, I said quietly, did you read the final settlement statement from First Heritage Title? She rolled her eyes, taking a sip of wine. Why would I read 30 pages of legal nonsense? I wired the $160,000. The escrow officer said the funds were cleared. Julian has the keys. The transaction is done. You can stop acting like a high and mighty auditor. You should have read page 4, I said, stepping forward and extending a single sheet of paper toward my father, who had just stepped out of the front door carrying a box of wine glasses. My father frowned, setting the box down on the porch railing. He walked down the driveway and took the paper from my hand. What is this? My father muttered, adjusting his reading glasses. That is the certified certificate of title recorded with the county registrar yesterday afternoon at 4:15, I explained, projecting my voice with absolute clarity. Look at the section labeled Grantee of Record. My father's eyes scanned the top section of the page. He stopped. His brow furrowed deeply. He leaned closer, squinting at the black ink under the state seal. Wait, he said, his voice dropping into a confused, unsteady register. Margaret. Why does this say Evelyn's name? My mother scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. What are you talking about, George? Give me that. She snatched the paper from my father's hands. Julian walked over, lowering his phone gimbal, sensing the sudden shift in the air. My mother stared at the document. Her eyes moved back and forth across the lines. Line 1. Legal owner of record. Evelyn Vance. Line 2. Primary obligor on underlying note. E. Velen Vance. Line 3. Authorized residential assignees. None. Line 4. Property status. Private residential asset. Immediate possession. This is a misprint, my mother stammered, her voice suddenly losing its arrogant edge, replaced by a rising note of panic. This is an administrative error. I gave them the down payment. I signed the wire from the credit union. You wired money from an account that belongs to my social security number, Mom, I said, looking her dead in the eyes. Under federal banking regulations, third-party funds cannot be applied to a residential conveyance without a verified gift affidavit from the primary taxpayer. You couldn't provide that affidavit because I never agreed to give Julian a single cent. Julian stepped forward, his face turning pale. Wait, Evelyn, what does that mean? Where is my name on the deed? Your name is not on the deed, Julian, I said calmly. Your name is not on the title. Your name is not on the mortgage. You have no legal interest, no equity, and no right of occupancy in this property. Vanessa, who had been standing on the porch holding a decorative vase, dropped her hands to her sides. Julian, what is she talking about? You told me your family bought this house for us. I did, Julian yelled, turning frantically toward our mother. Mom. What did you do? You told me the house was mine. My mother's face had completely lost its color. The glass of sparkling wine was shaking so violently in her hand that droplets were splashing onto her beige sweater. She lunged toward me, grabbing my coat sleeve. "Evelyn, you fix this right now. You call that title company and put Julian's name on that deed. We used your savings for this. You can't just steal your brother's house." I pulled my arm back with a sharp, deliberate motion, breaking her grip. "I did not steal anything, Mom," I replied, my voice slicing through the chaos like ice. "You walked into my credit union and emptied my life savings without my consent to fund your golden child's fantasy. You used my money, so I took my house." "I am your mother," she screamed, her voice cracking as several neighbors stepped out onto their front walkways to watch the spectacle. "You owe us. We gave you life. You cannot do this to your own family. For 10 years, you told me that I was on my own," I said, maintaining absolute composure. "You told me that Julian was the one who needed help, that I was strong enough to survive without you, and that my only value was to write checks to cover his failures. You were right about one thing, Mom. I am strong enough. Strong enough to enforce my legal rights." I reached into the folder, pulled out a bright yellow document bearing the red stamp of the county sheriff's civil division, and handed it to my father. "What is this?" my father whispered, his hands trembling. "That is a formal notice to vacate and cease trespass," I announced. "Since none of you have a valid lease agreement, tenant registration, or legal occupancy permit issued by the owner of record, you are currently unlawfully occupying private property." Julian looked at the yellow paper, then looked at the moving truck sitting in the driveway. "Evelyn, our furniture is already in the living room. The movers are halfway done. Then you have exactly 90 minutes to tell them to put the boxes back on the truck," I said, glancing at my watch. "At 5 o'clock, the locksmith arrives to change every deadbolt on the exterior doors. At 5:15, 2 county deputies will arrive to clear the property. If any of your belongings are inside after 5:15, they will be inventoried and placed on the curb for municipal collection." Vanessa let out a furious sob, threw her housewarming gift onto the lawn, and marched down the driveway toward her car, screaming at Julian, "You are a complete fraud. Don't you ever call me again." "Vanessa, wait," Julian pleaded, chasing after her down the pavement, but she slammed her car door and sped away, leaving him standing in the street in utter humiliation. My father slumped down onto the porch steps, holding his head in his hands, completely broken. For 30 years, he had enabled my mother's destructive favoritism, never once standing up to protect his eldest daughter. Now, he was watching the absolute ruin of his son's grand illusion in front of an entire neighborhood. My mother stood before me, tears streaming down her face, her chest heaving. The arrogance, the smug superiority, and the entitlement had completely evaporated. "Evelyn, please," she begged, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "We have nowhere to put this furniture. We spent $5,000 on the movers and the deposits. Julian's credit is ruined. Please just let him rent it from you. Let him live here. We will pay you back every month. I swear to God we will pay you back." I looked at the woman who had spent 9 years ignoring my existence, only to remember I was her daughter the moment she needed to rob me. "No, Mom," I said softly. "Julian cannot afford the electric bill on this house, let alone the market rent. And I will never enter into a financial agreement with people who believe theft is an act of family loyalty." I turned my back on them, walked over to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and rolled down the window. "You have 82 minutes remaining," I said. "I suggest you start moving boxes." At 4:55, the locksmith's van pulled up behind my car. 2 minutes later, a marked county sheriff's cruiser parked at the curb. My father and Julian spent the remaining time sweating in the afternoon heat, frantically hauling couches, dressers, and unpacked cardboard boxes back into the rented moving truck under the watchful eye of the uniformed deputy. My mother sat in the passenger seat of my father's sedan, staring straight ahead with swollen, red eyes, unable to look in my direction. When the last box was secured inside the truck, the deputy walked over to the front porch, watched the locksmith install heavy-duty deadbolts on the front and rear entryways, and handed me the 2 freshly cut brass keys. "Property is secure, ma'am," the deputy said, handing me the compliance receipt. No unauthorized persons remain on site. Thank you, officer, I said. I stood on the front porch of 742 Elmwood Avenue as the moving truck and my father's sedan pulled away from the curb, disappearing down the street into the evening traffic. The neighborhood grew completely quiet. The only sound was the rustling of the autumn leaves along the driveway. I walked through the front door into the empty house. The hardwood floors were bare. The walls were clean. The rooms were filled with late afternoon sunlight pouring through the wide front windows. There was no anger left in my chest. There was no racing heartbeat. There was only a profound, immovable sense of peace. I did not keep that house. I had no interest in living in a suburb full of memories of my family's entitlement. The following Monday, I listed 742 Elmwood Avenue on the multiple listing service as a pristine, turnkey residential property. Because the market for renovated homes in that school district was highly competitive, we received 4 written offers within 48 hours. 10 days later, I accepted an all-cash offer from a retired pediatrician and his wife for $435,000, $25,000 above what we had acquired it for at the distressed closing. After paying off the underlying balance note, closing fees, and attorney retainers, the title company wired the final net proceeds directly into a newly established, fully protected private wealth account under my sole corporate entity. My original $160,000 had been fully recovered, alongside a net profit of $21,400. Over the next 4 months, the fallout within my family was absolute. My mother attempted to rally our extended relatives against me, claiming that I had thrown my own brother onto the street and ruined his engagement out of jealousy. But this time, the narrative did not hold. Arthur had forwarded the certified bank records, the unauthorized wire documentation, and the county deed filings to every family member who sent an inquiring email. When my aunts, uncles, and cousins saw the undeniable paper trail proving that my mother had secretly drained my entire savings account to fund Julian's lifestyle, the sympathy vanished. My mother was quietly removed from the family holiday committee, and 2 of my uncles called me directly to apologize for having believed her lies over the years. Julian was forced to take a job managing inventory at a local warehouse facility to pay off the debts he had incurred on furniture and moving deposits. Vanessa never returned his calls. My father sent me a short, typed letter 3 weeks ago. There were no demands in it. No insults. Just a simple admission that he had failed to protect me, that he had allowed my mother's obsession with Julian to blind him for decades, and that he understood why I had chosen to cut ties completely. I read his letter once. I did not write back. I placed it inside my audit folder, closed the metal clasp, and filed it away in my home office archive. People often confuse revenge with boundaries. They believe that standing your ground against family cruelty is an act of aggression. It isn't. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is spending your energy trying to hurt someone because they hurt you. Justice is simply refusing to let people rewrite reality to suit their own selfishness. Justice is holding the mirror up to their actions and stepping out of the way so they can experience the exact consequences they engineered. Family is not an unconditional license to exploit, steal, or disrespect the people who love you. Blood may connect you by genetics, but loyalty, respect, and honesty are the only things that create a true home. When someone demonstrates that they view your hard work as their personal entitlement, do not argue. Do not shout. Document every fact, secure your ground, and remember that you never have to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. If you were in my position, would you have handed the deed over to your brother to keep the family peace, or did you agree with taking back every single dollar? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.